Absolutely. In fact, when two people of the opposite sex are attracted to one another, as a rule,
I think of those little hearts around them.
yeah. little energy anomalies that look like hearts. Yes, yes.
Speaking of the water and the vibrational energy of the water, could that be, to some extent, in your opinion, what craniosacral therapists are picking up on in the cerebrospinal fluid? Do they work on it at all?
No, I'm not really. I've been the subject of craniosacral therapy. And I really don't have an opinion. I mean, if I'm ignorant of a topic, I'm just going to flat say that I am. My study, research, reading is in other areas, but that's interesting that you should bring that up. I do find in my work.
Okay, so it's not really, it's more like kinetic energy that they're picking up on. Yeah. Okay.
In my work in 1932, an osteopath accidentally discovered that in your entire life until you die, your skull plates never fuse together. You know that. Mm-hmm. They move along the sutures about a silly 32nd of an inch. They're the pump that moves the cranial-spinal fluid. And they move the sacrum in the base of the spine, which moves in an S-shaped configuration. It's the most efficient pump in nature, a two-ended pump. Okay? Now, there are things that will go wrong that will freeze those skull plates. And I've had people that get horrible migraines, and the only relief is to rock those loose and get them moving. Because when that fluid comes out of those 7 little glands into the dura mater and then goes down the spinal column, if the pump is broken, it doesn't move. And every time I've had someone come to me, what is this infection they get in the spinal fluid? Meningitis? Skull plates are frozen. Skull plates are frozen. In other words, it's like a pond. If the water's stagnant, every bug and every microorganism in the world will grow in that water. But if the water's moving, it's self-cleaning. See what I mean by water? When water's allowed to move, it's self-cleaning. There's a reason for that. Just the motion of the particles tend to kick things out. It's like doing its own house cleaning. It's just amazing what water does.
And when we talk about spin state, what does that mean and how does it matter to us practically?
Okay, what it means is the spin state basically is an index of how much energy do those protons hold, and then that energy in turn determines the bonding angle. So all I'm doing is changing the bonding angle. And I figured out with geometry that the bigger the bonding angle, and it's only permissible to about 120 degrees. It can't go beyond that. When it gets to 120 degrees, the water particles form smaller polyhedra. And the smallest polyhedra, of course, is a tetrahedron. There's 4 water molecules. It can't get any smaller. But now, there is an exception. There is something called Brown's gas, where we get the water molecules to come apart, and they're free of other water molecules. And Brown's gas has amazing properties. You can weld dissimilar metals like aluminum and stainless steel together with Brown's gas. You can do amazing things with Brown's gas. It can be used to power an engine. Only so there's no explosion, there's an implosion. It actually sucks the piston back up instead of pushing it down. And the only byproduct is water.
They spin a particular direction, or does it matter? Or?
It doesn't matter. Spin orientation, spin up, spin down. Time out is, well, let's see. It's 9:15. What do you want to do here? More? More?
Stretch for a minute, though, everybody.
Everybody want to take a short break and stretch?
Shake your legs.
Well, I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I talked for 3 hours straight without a break, and the people were riveted, and they didn't know 3 hours had gone by. I hadn't, and that's the way I tend to operate. So it's up to you. If you guys want to take a short break, we can do that.
Why don't we take 3 minutes?
Okay. Nice camera. Stephen Pollock, University of Colorado, subatomic particle physics.
Not heard of it.
Pardon?
Not heard of it.
Okay. Very, very good lecturer. I like his style. He's very animated, but I try to emulate him and not be too animated. That's my problem. I've been told in the past I move around too much, I'm too animated. Energy. Now, another test that was done by the professor of microbiology, he asked me, how about if we analyze blood? Oh, I said, that's perfect. Analyze blood. What do you want us to look at, platelets or RBCs? I said, look at RBCs, red blood cells. Okay. So they used a white field microscope. And it was very interesting. There was a gentleman there, and he didn't know that he was the control in the test. The physicist set this up. He had everybody drinking my water get off of it about 3 to 4 weeks before this occasion. Quit drinking it, except for this gentleman. His wife was one that quit drinking it, and unbeknownst to him, he kept drinking 16 to 24 ounces a day, as I recommend. And I think that's plenty water to completely, totally, fully hydrate anybody. Okay? And when they took blood samples from everybody, including the professor, everybody's blood looked horrendous. Horrendous. Except for the gentleman who was drinking my water. And the professor of microbiology said, and I was given a sheet, I should have brought it with me to show you. In the center is a picture of what they call perfect blood, or ideal blood. And then there's all these smaller pictures around it depicting different conditions and problems in the blood. This man had ideal blood. He had ideal blood. And the professor says to the graduate students, come here, look at this. You're never going to see this again. This guy has perfect blood. I've never seen this before. And the physicist was looking at it and he said, that's amazing because the guy is a junk food junkie and a chain smoker. True. And he had perfect blood. Now, the biochemist in the Midwest, in his career, has conservatively analyzed about 40,000 blood samples, probably between 40 and 50,000. And he has a custom-built dark field microscope. It's a $40,000 instrument. The lenses were ground from quartz by Bausch & Lomb in Germany under license from Zeiss. The rest of it was built in Japan and assembled by the Japanese. It's quite an instrument. It takes up 2 tables. And when he called me, he said, here's what I've been doing. Take a live blood sample, put it on the slide. We're looking at it. You can see all the clumping of the cells and the stacking. Looks like plates, dinner plates, rouleaus. Yeah. He said, I'll have them drink a glass of your water and take a blood sample immediately. And I say, why? He says, because it's already going through the mucosal lining of the mouth. It goes into the bloodstream that fast. And he said, then we take a blood sample 2 hours later. And these are his words. I didn't put words in his mouth, and he didn't put them in mine. He said, it's the most profound and positive change in blood composition I've ever seen in my entire career. He said, I was on the bandwagon of the product of the month. I got caught up in products. And he says, I'm tired of products. He says, the market proliferates with products, and none of them do a damn thing for you. Okay? But he said, here's what I believe, based on what I've seen. Your water is the world's premier health and wellness product. In fact, it's head and shoulders above everything else. It's in a league of its own. He says, my friend, you might be a century ahead of everybody else. what I see is amazing because most of the problems in the human blood are caused by what?
Agglomeration,
Dehydration.
stickiness.
Yeah, it's caused by dehydration. And secondly, by a change in electrical charge. The membrane wall of a cell has to have a negative charge. When a protein, an undigested protein chain comes in and touches it, it robs its electrical charge. They begin to clunk together. Those two things, dehydration and electrical charge. If you're taking minerals in a solid state, sometimes you could derive benefit from the electrical charge, from the ionic state. But your body can't use the mineral nutritionally. It's in the wrong form, not the right isotope, and in the wrong state. It has to be energy, not in a solid state. Come on.
So the electrical charge has a strong effect on pH.
That's right.
Just drinking your water would give you the minerals that you need, but not necessarily give you the pH that you need.
That's right. Unless water has what we call a structured pH. It depends on the predominance or lack of what we call hydroxy ions in the water. That's what water ionizers do. They basically strip an electron or a proton and it goes off free. Now you've got an OH negative entity, that's a hydroxy ion, and that's alkaline. And the free proton is acid. That's all that makes an acid, is a hydrogen bond. HCl, H2SO4, hydrofluoric acid, hydrogen, fluorine, they're acetic acid, there are just hydrogen bonds. The perfect acid for the human body has a pH lower than sulfuric acid, and yet you can put it in your eye. It won't burn you, it's non-caustic. A chemist made it down in Grass Valley, California. It starts out as H9O4, I believe it is. It's H9O4, H9O5. And when you dilute it, it becomes what? Hydronium, H3O. But in its concentrated state, it has a pH lower than sulfuric acid, and yet you can put it in your eyes and won't burn you. It's non-caustic. It's called a perfect acid. And it's very interesting what they're doing with this with agriculture. They'll take and spray tomatoes with it, leave the tomato on the counter, it'll stay there for days and days and days and days and not degrade a bit. They're spraying fruit trees. It helps condition the pH of the soil. And it gets rid of all the nasties on the fruit trees. And it's actually beneficial to the fruit trees.
Can we get this stuff?
Your body makes it all the time. Every time you drink water on an empty stomach, you're forming hydronium, H3O. And that's did you know that there are vessels that go straight from your stomach to your brain? That's how important hydration of the brain is. Your body wants water in an empty stomach to hydrate the brain. It pumps it right up there. If you've ever had something really cold on a really hot day, you get brain freeze. Pumping straight from the stomach to the brain. And that temperature differential shocks the tissue. That's brain freeze.
Is that why they tell us to drink the NanoFlow water as soon as you get up in the morning?
Yeah. Hydrate the brain, hydrate the bowels. I'm in my health club and I see a poster on the bulletin board. There's a talk on water. Well, I want to see what Dr. So-and-so says about water. So I go to the talk. No, I don't have that attitude. I want to know what everybody has to say. I'm not a cocky individual. I buried my ego in the backyard a long time ago. Ego doesn't serve anybody or anything. Leave ego out of this. Check it at the front door. I want to know what they... Go ahead.
Can you elucidate on free-floating radicals and the leaky gut syndrome?
I'm not real up on leaky gut syndrome. I just know that I was working with nature paths in the Midwest, and that's how the candida gets out of your gut into the bloodstream is leaky bowel. Yeah.
Yeah, so how would the water help dissolve
Well, eventually, the doctor and his wife are both MDs, and they practice together in my hometown. And what they're saying about water is this, that there's a profound implication between, a correlation between all of these nasty bowel problems, diverticulitis, Crohn's, irritable bowel syndrome. Anybody think of another one? Colitis. And dehydration of the tissue of the bowel. So they were telling everybody at room temperature, every morning on an empty stomach, drink 16 ounces of water. Why at room temperature? Because there's a valve called the duodenal valve, and among other things, it's there to protect the core temperature of the body. It won't let water into the intestine until the temperature rises. Okay? And it's not a real good time of the day to shock your system with something that needs a lot of BTUs from you. So drink your water at room temperature. My water, I say, if you're going to work up to 24 ounces a day, drink 12 ounces of it, half of it, first thing in the morning. Because not only does it hydrate the bowel, it hydrates the brain. Now, I've had a number of people tell me, I'm having the best bowel movements I've had for years, and that's important. Drinking your water. Now, if you have leaky bowel syndrome, get some flax lignans. Incredibly slippery, and they'll seal the bowel. They'll stop it up. Flax lignans. Start there. Then I've got something that'll take, guaranteed, kill 99.99% of the candida outside of the gut in the bloodstream within 7 days. Guaranteed, I'm running back. It's a homeopathic.
What is it?
A homeopathic. It's called capital C dash clear. It's a homeopathic actually made from Candida albicans. It's fantastic, made by a brilliant man outside of Spokane in Cheney, Washington. Anybody have heard of Bruce Tainio? Bruce is the man that the Chinese used. Along a major river in China, they had real high sodium soils that were not conducive to agriculture. He created a bacteria, and they put the bacteria up, and the bacteria actually changed the sodium to potassium. Now the soils become conducive to agriculture. And he can do that for disasters, like if they would have let him in to Louisiana, he could have cleaned up all the water with bacteria. Oh no, because he wasn't the right contractor. It wasn't Halliburton, was it? Oh no, we can't have anybody else make any money off of this disaster or off of this war or whatever. See how the world really works? It stinks. And so the deal is, this man is very bright, doing some of the same work I'm doing. In fact, I'll tell you what he did. He told me this on the phone one day. Said I had a study. I had 300 people with multiple sclerosis. And the prerequisite was that they had to be in wheelchairs for at least 2 to 3 years. I got every one of them, all 300, out of wheelchairs, leading normal lives. The FDA called me and told me I was going to knock that off. We don't want people getting well. There's no money in wellness. The money is in sickness. The money is in managing the symptoms, not curing the disease. In reality, there is no such thing as a cure. That's a fallacy. Take that word out of the dictionary. It's meaningless, it's misleading, it's misdirecting. Nobody in history ever cured anything. Ever. With any modality, any drug, anything. The body simply needs to renormalize the cellular function. That's the only thing that goes wrong. There is, in reality, one disease, cellular malfunction. And you have to give the body the tools it needs to renormalize the cellular function. It does the work. We don't do anything. We've never done anything. But give a little helping hand and get out of the way and let the body do what it's designed to do. Reestablish balance, homeostasis. Come back to a situation that's normal, quote unquote normal. That's all we've ever done. Nobody ever cured anything. Nobody ever will. In all of history, past, present, and future. It'll never be done. This machine knows how to take care of its own problems. sometimes it just needs a little boost. See how this works? And I tell you what, the level of thinking in this country is abysmal. I hate to say this, but George Carlin referred to Americans, to the United States, as a nation of uninspired halfwits. And I'm afraid he was right. What people in this country no longer have is the ability to do critical thinking. They don't want to do critical thinking. It's too much work. It's easier to use a remote and sit in front of a TV. Nobody wants to think. Boy, I tell you what, you got to get to the point where you're willing to do some of your own thinking, because if you let that guy do your thinking and his motive is money, you're screwed. See the point? You don't want to do that. You don't want to hand control over to somebody else. Take some responsibility. When you do that and begin to thinking, you'll end up with somebody like Stephen. You'll go to Stephen. You'll go maybe to somebody like me or some of the other therapists here. But when you realize that every drug ever made by man doesn't do anything but suppress symptoms, think about it. And what is a side effect? It's the same as a contraindication. They're the same thing. What are those things? They're a toxic reaction. They're all toxins. I defy you to prove me wrong. I defy anybody on earth to prove me wrong. A contraindication is a potential toxic effect. That's all they are. And that's all they ever will be. Pharmacology is a bass-ackwards approach. It always was and always will be. At the basis of all chemistry is physics. To understand chemistry, you have to understand physics. I believe, in my opinion, the best approach is to forget chemistry, i.e. pharmacology, and deal with problems from the energy standpoint purely. Harmless, uninvasive, no side effects. There's no toxicity to it.
And you get better.
Because the energy, if it's not specific, it does nothing. And if it's not specific, it's also not harmful. It passes on through. See the point? There's a beauty in this. Yes?
Could you go back a second to say what hydronium does in the body?
Hydronium, the brain likes to hydrate on hydronium. When you drink water in an empty stomach, it mixes with hydrochloric acid and forms this weak acid solution called hydronium, which is essentially H3O. The brain wants to hydrate on that. It's like a car battery. There's a lot of electrical activity. It likes a weak acid solution. The brain wants to hydrate on hydronium. That's why it's so important on an empty stomach, drink water.
Can you take pills at the same time at that point?
You can, but I don't recommend it. Now you're asking the body to multitask. And if we're males, we can't do that.
You got it.
I can't absorb water and digest a pill at the same time. If you're a woman, you're all right. Yes.
Two clients that I work with come to mind thinking about the water, which you had talked about earlier as far as blood conditions. And one client has a blood platelet disease. It's an overproliferation of thrombocytes called essential thrombocytosis.
Okay.
Do you think this water would affect that? And also a second client, another client I work with, is a burn survivor who sustained third-degree burns in 86% of her body. It's been a little over 2 years since the accident, and still has some really big, gaping, oozing wounds that just really started to close. She's been to a Vietnamese herbalist who gives her dry herbs to put in water. His diagnosis was weakened kidneys from the accident, but he says that her organs have strengthened, but the wounds still continue to
How about lavender oil?
Okay, yeah, lavender oil on topically, lavender oil.
No,
But-
actually, I've experienced.
Yeah.
I had a down to the bone burn on my hand, and I did use I'm an oil therapist. I did use essential oils on it, and it healed faster than they have ever medically seen a severe.
She's been using lavender oil,
Okay.
oil from
It's
Australia.
gotta be a good
It's got to, yeah, it has
Yeah,
to be
try,
good.
a lot of the lavender oils are adulterated with chemistry, then they won't work. It's got to be pure.
The only stuff I use is Oshadi, which is the organic.
Yeah, these are organic oil.
Well, I'll tell you, aside from that, I can't tell you how many special conditions I've had brought to my attention, and all I can tell people is try water. Try hydration, see what happens. I've had the hydration do things that
You put the top.
To me, it sounds like science fiction. Yeah, you can put it on topically.
Even on an open wound?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. There's a gentleman here that knows all about colloidal silver. Is he here right now?
Did you say to put the water on top of it?
He left.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can put it on topically. Yeah, I mean, you ever take a bath? Water isn't going to hurt your skin, but this water is amazing because it penetrates so easily, membranes. Okay. Your body has a need for a nutritional isotope of silver. And silver is like any metal. Metals are toxins to the human body. They're poisons. Any metal, including colloidal silver. Now, if colloidal silver will kill over 700 known pathogens, there's a reason why. It's slowly killing you. You're a pathogen as far as it's concerned. Yeah, you're just a bigger germ. Seriously. Isotope 105 of silver is a very unstable isotope, and your body wants it nutritionally. But you know what? We're finding it works as well, and in some cases better than colloidal silver. It's nothing but an energy in the water. There's no buildup of energy from this. It doesn't work that way. You can't build up an excess of any energy from this. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. In the same way that my ex-partner was making gold nuggets made of gold, platinum, and palladium, by the way, which are all precious metals, your body synthesizes those minerals. It doesn't want to deal with a solid part. Just give me the energy, and I'll do the work, thank you. The cell does that. Oh, do you mean living things transmute elements? Oh, you betcha they do. Case in point, the research of Louis Kervran, Frenchman, doing experiments with chickens. Take a chicken, a nice healthy laying hen. Well, if we take all the calcium out of her diet, she shouldn't be able to lay an egg. Can't form a shell, right? They're made of calcium. So, sure enough, you do that, doesn't affect that chicken a bit. Goes on laying perfectly good eggs. Well, that's interesting. Let's see what happens if we put the calcium back and take the potassium out. Now she can't lay an egg. There's no shell around the egg. She lays a mess. Why? She can't use calcium in the form it's coming in her diet. She has to take the potassium and convert it to calcium. Kervran's work went way beyond that. He found that the microorganisms in soil are transmuting elements all the time, just like my friend in Cheney, Washington. Isn't that interesting? They're converting elements in the soil. Our agricultural practices are killing that. Thanks to Dow and DuPont and Monsanto, who want us to put their chemical fertilizers on the soil and don't do a thing. They're killing the microbes, and it's the microorganisms that build soil. It's the microorganisms that do all the work. They're miracle workers. They're miracle workers. And they're very simple little critters. They're miracle workers. And we're killing them with chemical fertilizers. Why? Because it makes somebody money. My God, this whole thing is so asinine, I can barely stay on this planet anymore.
How long have we got?
I don't know. Well, I don't worry about an asteroid killing the human race. Our stupidity will kill us long before an asteroid gets us. So I can't even watch those movies because that's irrelevant. I'm not going to worry about a near-Earth miss. So anyway, that was what Louis Kervran was working on. And all cells do this. It isn't just a chicken. It isn't any one species. It's cellular biology in general is doing things that biologists will not give it credit for. Once again, I cannot take responsibility for the fact that you think you're going to put your head somewhere else and find oxygen there. Okay, you can interpret that any way you want, but you can't live with your head there. You got to get it out of there and look around. Okay, And decide that if you're going to get something done, you're going to have to be willing to think differently than everybody else thinks. Once again, go back to Mr. Einstein's another statement. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Why do people think this way? When I teach my students, I drum those two axioms into them. Drum it into them. You cannot get your foot stuck in the bear trap of a paradigm. Don't ever do that. You're dead. That's the end of your creative process. Do you know what Mr. Einstein said? He left his brain to science. And his brain has been compared to roughly 100,000 other human brains, and they found no difference. Until, yes?
Marion Diamond found that the glial cells are about 15% more abundant.
And then it went beyond that. A graduate student in Utah, a young lady, discovered behind the right eye is a postage stamp part of the brain called the creatomagus. And in Einstein's brain, not only was the glial bridging denser, but there was more neural mass than they'd ever seen. That's why Einstein said creativity is more important than knowledge itself. He did it all with the power of creativity. In other words, until the day he died, he remained a child. And that's what I'm stuck in. That's my paradigm. I'm a kid playing in the sandbox of life and having a ball doing it. Okay? And like Batman Ghali, who was put in prison for political prisoners, he kept doing it in prison. You won't suppress a guy who's very creative, even by sticking him behind bars. He'll find a way.
What did he keep doing?
He cured people with water.
He cured people with water in prison.
Dirty water.
He didn't even want to be released because he had ongoing research going in prison.
Yeah, he had some people he had to cure. I met him.
Yeah. He was in an Iranian prison for political prisoners. Well, hey, think about it. If you're really curious, there isn't anything that's going to stop you from being curious and exploring things and looking into other possibilities. And that's what that's what wins Nobel Prizes. Eventually is curiosity and being willing to think outside of the box. And it's too easy to be confined to that box. So now, in order to manipulate or engineer water, I had to get way out of that box. Now, I'm so far out of that box, I don't even really want to talk to other physicists. What's the point? I know the water's the wettest water in the world. Prove me wrong. Prove my hypothesis wrong. Prove my research wrong. Here's the results. You explain it. If you know so much, give us an explanation. But it still doesn't change the fact that we have the world's most hydrating water here. Ultimately, it's still water. It can't hurt you. The only thing it can do, if you start out with too much, is create a Hertzheimer effect. Yes, everybody here has had some of that. When the cells begin to hydrate, their first priority is to purge toxins. They're really dirty, and they really want to get rid of that stuff. So as soon as the water gets inside, burp, out come the poisons. Now, 85% of the water, this is 100% subnanostate water. When it gets into your body, 85% of it will remain subnanostate and 15% will be converted back to nanostate. That's because a lot of the fluid in your body is so garbaged up and inefficient and full of poisons. Eventually, as time goes on, that will change. A larger and larger percentage as time goes on, and there's a curve, and I've been graphing it, it's fascinating. More and more that water will remain sub-nanometer. Okay? Because your water is changing. The human body is actually more than anything else, it's a study in fluid dynamics. You're just a series of tubes, and inside of all those tubes are fluids. And those fluids are there. I mean, when you think of the function of water, what is water for? Well, we call it the universal solvent. Sure, it's the universal solvent. We can dump, and we do. We dump everything into water. Even our solid garbage goes into the oceans. what do you think New York City does with our garbage? Okay, it goes into the oceans. So water is the universal solid. It goes way beyond that. Water regulates temperature. Water is a lubricant. It's a transport vehicle for nutrients and gases, and it's a transport vehicle for toxins, for the byproducts of metabolism, metabolic waste. Okay? Water performs all kinds of different functions in the body. And quite honestly, you can't have life without water. All of biology is dependent on water. Try to have life without water and see how far you get. You know, it's not the only reason we're there, but we've got this rover still active on Mars. And what's it looking for? Water. There's an assumption that a life arose when, it's a universal phenomenon that life will arise where the conditions are right. The conditions are only right when there's an abundance of water. Not a little water. There has to be an abundance of water. Because water only holds so much garbage, and living organisms produce a lot of garbage. Therefore, you have to have an abundance of water, not just a little. Otherwise, no life. So we're up there looking for evidence that there was at one time a lot of water. And from the remote imaging, it looks like, yeah, there's evidence that there was a lot of water on the surface of Mars. And the question is, where is it today? Why is it not there on the surface? And so on and so forth. So it opens up some fascinating hypotheses, and I won't go there. But anyway, that's what we're doing on Mars. That's because biology is dependent on water. It can't exist without water. All biology is water-based, and there's a really good reason for that, guys. And in 25 years, I've never found anybody that's come to me that's been hydrated. Never in 25 years has anybody been hydrated. Everyone that's ever come to me was dehydrated. Even people drinking up to 2 gallons of water a day. I've done the figures. If you want to hydrate on normal water, you have to drink about 300 gallons a day. Have fun. Newborn, they still need a little bit of this water. They get dehydrated too. They killed a young man. It was a hazing incident last spring. Had him drink 5 gallons of water and killed him. He died of water toxicity. You see, that water goes into your bloodstream, but because it can't be absorbed by the cells, it's channeled right to the kidneys and out, and it absolutely destroyed his kidneys. His kidneys were so overburdened that they quit and killed him. He dies of renal failure. That's what water toxicity does to you. Okay? You want to make sure that the water you are drinking will be absorbed by the cells. And that's what we've accomplished here. I'm talking about hydration efficiency. We're about to go to Singapore and China on the basis of the test that was done this summer by the professor of microbiology. When people saw with their own eyes what this water does, that was convincing. So one morning I get a phone call from this physicist, and he says, congratulations. In fact, it was the following Tuesday. And he caught me off guard. I said, for what? He said, your water. That's a hell of an accomplishment. That's the kind of thing that can win a Nobel Prize. But he says, I don't think you'll ever win one for that. No, sir, he says. There ain't many people in this world, and I don't care what degree they've got. They're going to take that seriously. He said, my girlfriend and I are having trouble following your reasoning, and she's a brilliant German chemist, and I'm a physicist. But he says, every time you write to me, all I can see in your writing, he said, and this is his words, is brilliance. He said, you're way out ahead of us. He said, that's the kind of person it takes to actually forge into new territory and get something done, and the rest of us are sitting there going like this. And we do it for years. Remember Sir Arthur Eddington? He's the man that went to Africa to take pictures of the eclipse to prove or disprove Einstein's theory of general relativity, that light coming past the sun would be bent by the gravitational field of the sun. That's what he went to Africa to do. in the 1930s, somebody asked Sir Arthur Eddington, it was I believe a reporter. He said, I understand there are 3 people in the world